Welcome to the story about a mob summit, Part 2. Link for Part 1 in description below. Adjust to a comfortable volume and rest well. Phone lines are shy muscles. They live on poles like cats on warm fences, and they dislike being stared at. When a county grows curious, the lines feel it. They length themselves by a thought. They clear their throats in small humming sounds that only birds and linemen pretend to hear. Today, the lines are busy without wanting to be. In town, the exchange sits on a quiet street that smells like starch and window soap. A row of lamps above a board waits to wink. An operator hangs her sweater on the back of a sensible chair and smooths the cord that is her daily leash to the whole county. She has a pencil with a kindly eraser and a clock that runs a little slow on purpose. Slow is mercy in a room like this. Calls begin as they always begin. A grocer rings to ask about a delivery. A barber calls to say he will come by the hardware store after he sweeps. A preacher calls a farmer who has borrowed hymnals and wishes to return them without a fuss. The operator makes the connections and writes the usual notes which look like the handwriting of a breeze. Then the pattern changes without raising its voice. A payphone at the crossroads becomes popular in a way that payphones understand but do not advertise. A man enters the booth, closes the folding door with the slow dignity that folding doors prefer, and releases a handful of coins that sound like small weather. The operator hears the ring and does her work. The call is short, more punctuation than sentence, and then the line goes obediently dark. Another call from the same booth 2 minutes later. Then 5 minutes after that. The operator arranges the wires as if she were pinning laundry to a line. She can tell when a line will flutter and when it will hold. These new calls hold without breath. She notes this on a pad as a tithe only and underlines it lightly. Underlines are lot laws. They are the clothing of attention. Farther out, a farmhouse line shares a party circuit with 3 neighbours. This party line understands gossip the way ponds understand frogs. It expects noise and it expects courtesy. Tonight the neighbours listen the way rain listens to roofs. Only the click of a lift here and a cautious set down there. The operator hears the etiquette and thanks the county for remembering itself. At the diner, a wall phone is used for its usual purpose, which is to ask if someone has left a hat. Hats go wandering when coffee succeeds. The waitress answers with a laugh that calms the wire. She replaces the receiver and narrows her eyes at the crossword from last month. The pencil writes the word clue and then stops because the day has enough of those. Between poles, the lines sag in an honest curve. They do not pretend to be straight soldiers. Sag is how wires keep their minds when winter comes to tug and summer comes to argue. Today, sag is the shape of discretion. Sound travels like careful water in a shallow ditch. It knows where to go. It does not splash. At the exchange, the operator speaks with the patience of a librarian and the briskness of a cook. Number please becomes a prayer and a recipe in one breath. She doesn't judge voices. She files them by weight and by urgency, and by whether they seem to know how long a ring should be allowed to ring before it becomes a worry. A call from the house on the hill arrives with a ring that has practiced respect. The operator recognizes the cadence. The caller does not ask for a city. He asks for a town 2 counties over that minds its own business and sells good fish on Fridays. The operator makes the connection and writes down the minute and the second as if she were measuring rain in a spoon. On the road, a trooper listens to his radio learn the alphabet again. The radio is a different kind of telephone. It keeps no secrets. It talks to the air like a man who likes to stand in doorways. The trooper sets the volume as low as a whisper and lets the road speak over it. He is listening for the feeling that a county gets when its wires are working at a new tempo. He sips what is left in his cup and decides that tempo is exactly the word. A second operator comes in for the evening. She sets her lunch pail in the corner and tests 3 lines with the back of a familiar hand. She can tell if a wire is tired. Tonight they are alert without being nervous. She puts on the headset like a violinist lifting her instrument and settles into the stool that will be her ship for hours. The board breathes. She breathes with it. In the gas station, the payphone looks at the bell hose with mutual respect. They are both instruments that measure the day. The hose counts arrivals by weight. The phone counts sentences by coins. The young attendant has learned not to stand within earshot. When men want privacy, he pretends to inventory a stack of rags by the office door. The rags are very easy to inventory. They are rags. An odd thing happens with time when many short calls take the same path. A minute looks longer. 5 minutes looks like a quiet lake. The operator watches the lamps wink, takes her pencil for a walk across a sheet, and gives herself a rule. Any line that stays busy for a whole song deserves a tiny check in the margin. She hums the song under her breath and moves the chords with a grace that shoes never hear. Long distance has its own theatre. The request for it sounds different, as if the caller has straightened his shoulders. The operator explains the delay with the ease of a store clerk who has learned to sell patience. She patches one line to another line to a man in a city where lines hang from buildings like laundry and where patience is sold by the inch. The distant operator greets her as a cousin. Cousin is the right word for people who keep towns talking. At the house, the cousin from the coat room steps past the hallway table where a small phone sits like a poised bird. The receiver is heavy in the way good tools are heavy. A man lifts it, dials with the measured confidence of someone who once learned to use a rotary dial without looking. He speaks briefly and carefully. The words are ordinary words that carry extra meaning only because of when they are spoken. Then the receiver returns to its cradle as if settling into a nest. Across the county, the lines run along old routes that were agreed upon by men who respected trees and were suspicious of streams. Where a stream insists on its own bridge, the poles gather on either side like friends discussing a border. The wires hop the water on porcelain insulators that look like pale mushrooms. On damp evenings, those insulators hum like a choir of bees. The operators call it singing. The linemen call it work. The phone in the grocery does its small duties. A customer rings to ask if butter has arrived. The owner answers yes, and doesn't mention that the bell on the door has counted cars it does not usually count. He has decided the phone is a kettle. He will let it hiss when it wants to, and he will not lift the lid to see how fast the boil. A grocer who guards his own temperature keeps the county from making mistakes. The diner phone takes a message for a man who is in no mood for messages. The waitress writes it on a pad shaped like a slice of pie and leaves it on the edge of the register where impatience will trip over it and read every word. Messages do not need to be brilliant. They need to be placed where the right eyes go when they are tired. At the exchange, a boy with good posture arrives to deliver the evening paper. He sets it near the ledger where call times settle into columns. The headline is about something else entirely. The operator places a cup on the paper to keep it from sliding off the table. The cup leaves a ring that looks like a planet around the town that has agreed to be the center for one small night. A lamp on the board begins to glow more often than its neighbors. It belongs to a number at the edge of the county, where farms get serious and creeks run as if they remember glaciers. The operator considers it. She knows which lines belong to teenagers who should be doing chores. She knows which lines belong to widows who are allowed to talk long because talking long is a kind of medicine. This lamp is neither. She marks it with a dot so she will not forget. She wondered. A call arrives from a hotel in a city that is fond of marble. The voice asks for someone whose name is a common word. The operator cannot help because the county is full of that word, and most of the men who own it do not wish to be found. She offers 3 numbers of men who will not mind being mistaken for men with the same name. The voice declines with courtesy. The lamp goes dark. Courtesy is useful even when it achieves nothing. There are rules in the switch room. Do not repeat a name you did not need to hear. Do not brag about a guess that was only luck. Do not imagine the story that lives between rings. The operator obeys the rules and keeps her mind where it can do good, which is on the chords and the lamps, and the voice that says "number please," the same way from first call to last. Back in the gas station, the payphone door sticks. It sticks on purpose. Doors like to remind men that being inside a small glass box does not mean the world cannot see them. The man hangs up and steps out and nods to the attendant, who returns the nod with the respectful boredom that good attendants bring to any day that is trying to become special. The bell on the hose marks another arrival. The attendant tilts his head toward the sound the way a dog does when it chooses to be wise. A crackle passes along the lines near the river like a rumour that changes nobody. The operator hears it and drops her pencil onto the ledger so her hands can be free if the board asks for both. The crackle fades. The lamps keep their obligations. She retrieves the pencil and draws a small star in the margin, which means nothing happened, and yet something tried. In the house, a hallway table hosts a thin directory that looks pompous and is useful only when people forget that towns run on memory. A man flips the pages as if the book might hide a decision. The cousin notices the way his finger stops at a name and then moves on. Names are stones in a river. They change the surface without changing the river. Night puts one more coat on the wires. They accept the fabric and sink a little deeper between poles. Lamps in kitchens turn to warmer shades. Lamps in offices do their best to remain cool and fail. Lamps in the exchange remain the same, because lamps that work for a living have no time for mood. The operator listens for the late calls, the ones that try to sneak past dinner and sleep and claim the hour without paying. A trooper drifts past the exchange on his loop and glances at the windows. He always does. He likes knowing that the room with the cords exists. It means the county still makes its connections by hand. He thinks that is how a place should do its talking, with hands and not with magic. He continues toward the crossroads where a booth has learned to be spry. 2 short rings from the house to the neighbour with the chairs. That is the code for gratitude. Everyone knows it without having been told. Codes that grow from kindness do not need teachers. The neighbour lifts and sets down. The operator watches the lamps and feels a small lift in her own chest she will not mention to anyone. Long distance returns for an encore. The city operator brings the county operator a voice that has been sharpened by tall buildings and then softened by distance. The message is brief. It asks a question that is really a schedule. The county voice answers with a yes that is really a map. The chords rest as the lamps fade. It is possible to hear a room relax. The operator shows the room how to do it by example. At the end of the shift, the ledger receives totals, not names, not dramas, totals of minutes, of attempts, of completions, of delays that taught patience without punishing. The operator closes the book and pats the cover, the way one pats a child who has earned its supper. She hangs the headset on its hook, which looks like an ear that never tires. She switches off the desk lamp and leaves the room lit only by the board, which prefers to sleep with a night light just in case. Out on the poles the insulators cool and stop singing. A single moth makes a small decision about a bulb near the back door of the exchange and changes its mind. The street settles into the audible quiet that towns use to count themselves. Wires keep their own count. They count down, not up, toward a stillness that will not last. At the gas station, the attendant locks the drawer and winds the shade. He checks that the booth door closes and opens as it should. He taps the glass lightly with his knuckle, which is how attendants say goodnight to objects that have been kept busy. The bell hose lies across the pavement like a cat that has decided there will be no more games. The house on the hill rests its receiver on its cradle and tells itself that the talking is done. In the coat room, the window remains open the width of a pencil, so that wool will not remember voices it did not need to hear. In the kitchen, a kettle thinks of boiling and decides to wait until morning. If you are drifting, consider the sound that wires make when they decide to be quiet. It is its silence. It is a small approval. If you are awake, picture the operator turning the last page of the ledger and setting her pencil beside it like a bookmark from a country without borders. The phone lines have stretched their necks all day, and now they tuck their chins in and go to sleep on pillows made of air. News is a trumpet that thinks it is a microscope. It wants to magnify, and it wants to be heard across counties. Quiet rooms, the kind with rugs and clocks and pencil sharpeners, prefer to measure. Today both kinds of rooms begin to notice each other. The country house breathes in its own careful air, while in towns and cities, presses wake with the appetite of morning. In the city, a stack of papers sleeps under a strap that remembers every night. The press floor smells like ink and metal and water that learn to move like smoke. Composers slide letters into trays that hold their patients in rows. The foreman reads a line aloud and judges whether a sentence can survive being shouted from a corner. The sentence does not know yet that its subject is a backyard with chairs and a driveway that learn to count. A desk editor in shirt sleeves weighs words as if they were fruit, too soft and the page sags, too hard and the reader feels bruised. He keeps a notebook of verbs that do not accuse and adjectives that do not promise more than they can carry. It is his private art to stack facts like plates, so they will not rattle when the delivery boy runs. Across the river, a smaller paper sits in a room with 2 windows and a calendar that rotates itself by willpower. The editor there knows the names of creeks and the inventory of the feed store. He drinks coffee that tastes like the road. When a call comes in from a cousin of a cousin about unusual plates near a certain lane, he writes the words, "country gathering," and then covers them with his hand as if to warm them into accuracy. Back at the house, the coat room keeps its pencil width of open air. The cousin studies a hat with the expression of a librarian shelving a familiar book. In the dining room, the coffee urn works through its agreements with flame. The quiet here, is it empty? It is purposeful. It is made of the small noises of a building minding its job while people think thoughts they would rather not say out loud. In a newsroom far away, a rewrite man leans back and listens to a telephone that was designed for arguments. He hears the phrase, "meeting in the country," and the words "cars" and "plates," and the kind of pause that wants another pause beside it. He lights a cigarette and does not smoke it. He balances the cigarette on a saucer that is older than his job and begins to ask the simple questions that make rooms uncomfortable. The city desk sends a stringer with a notebook that used to contain baseball scores. The stringer wears shoes that do not like gravel. He borrows a car from a friend with better tires. On the dash he places a map that looks official from a distance and confesses its confusion when touched. He writes the name of the town at the top of a page with careful letters. Careful letters are a promise to try. At the gas station, the attendant sees the stringer arrive. He recognizes the shoes. He recognizes the breathless pencil. He offers directions that are correct and vague at the same time. He wipes the same arc of fender he has been wiping for hours. He is it against newspapers. He is against hurry that believes in itself more than in facts. On the copy desk in the city, a headline artist lays out words on a mock page. He tries a line that includes the word summit and then crosses it out, because summits belong to mountains, and this story belongs to a yard that keeps laundry pins. He writes quiet meeting and decides quiet will not sell. He writes secret meeting and decides secret will invite mistakes. He waits for a verb that behaves. A telegraph operator taps out the skeleton of an item. It is only a hint, a county, a road, a number of cars that seems both specific and not to be trusted. The wire carries this hint to rooms that love hints the way cats love warm windowsills. In those rooms, men sharpen pencils and decide which correspondent lives nearest to trees without disliking them. Meanwhile, the trooper finishes a page in his notebook with numbers and simple nouns. He is careful with nouns. A noun can start a parade. He chooses road and lane and sedan and leaves out any word that might remember a face. He writes the time and places a dot beside it. Dots are the most honest punctuation. They do not lean. The small paper in the county does not rush to print. It runs twice a week and prefers to be right on the second day rather than wrong on the first. The editor calls the diner and asks how many cups were carried out by men with hats that vote in other precincts. The waitress gives a number that feels like a weather report. The editor writes the number and draws a small square beside it that means check later. In the city, a columnist with a taste for theatre asks for details. He wants a name to hang a coat on. He wants a scene. He wants a line that will let readers picture a front porch without having to go outdoors. The reporter on the other end of the phone describes a mailbox that has learned to be looked at and a cat that believes in customs. The columnist smiles, but does not write cat. He writes officials and gathering. The cat forgives him. Paper is a country of its own. In that country forms rule. A police blotter wants lists. A society page wants arrangements of names that suggest flowers. A features desk wants a story that can be folded into 900 words and served with a picture of a hat. This story doesn't fit any of those shelves. It leaks across them like light that has changed its mind. A photographer is dispatched with a box that remembers flash powder. He arrives at the crossroads and takes a picture of the gas station sign, because signs do not complain about being photographed. He takes another of the road where it bends like a sentence that needs a comma. He doesn't drive up the lane. He is its brave or cautious. He is polite. Polite often looks like wisdom when the print is set. Back at the house, the men return to chairs that have decided to remain chairs for one more hour. A voice that has earned quiet says that attention is a storm you cannot stop by shouting at the rain. Another voice says the best umbrella is time. A third voice says umbrellas do not work in wind. The kitchen chooses to refill the fruit plate. Fruit makes better company than arguments. In the city, the pressman checks the water level in the dampening system. He has a job that keeps ink from running away with words. He listens to the machine that will soon ask for paper, and hears a small rattle that belongs to a bolt. He tightens the bolt and thinks of nothing in particular. The thing about loud machines is that they require quiet minds. A wire service puts a short item on the line. Lawmen observe unusual traffic near a residence in a rural area. The item is shaped to fit anywhere. It is a coat on a store rack waiting for a customer with the right shoulders. A radio man in a newsroom reads the item aloud and decides it will sit on a shelf until it grows a second sentence. The small paper begins to craft a paragraph that will explain the county to itself. It mentions the time of day and the quality of the light and the fact that people noticed and were kind about noticing. It does not use the word mob. It uses the word people. It does not use the word raid. It uses the word visit. It rebuilds the scene with words that will not spoil breakfast when read aloud at a table. Across town, a headline artist finally finds a verb that behaves. He writes, gathers, and underlines it. Gathers does its work without calling in cavalry. He chooses a size of type that tells readers to pay attention and also to keep breathing. He places the word county ahead of the road because counties are what readers belong to when they are not belonging to cities. Back at the house, a phone rings with only enough energy to complete its duty. A man answers and listens to someone who wants a statement. He offers a remark about hospitality and the kindness of neighbours with chairs. He mentions nothing that would persuade verbs to dress themselves as sirens. He returns the receiver to its cradle and looks at the coat room. The coat room looks back without opinion. The stringer visits the grocery. He buys a pack of gum and asks questions that are shaped like gossip but carry the weight of ink. The grocer answers like a man sweeping his own stoop. He confirms that cold cuts were delivered. He declines to speculate on appetite. He offers a bag for the gum with the same care he would offer a bag for a roast. The stringer writes nothing that the grocer would not repeat to his own mother. In the city, a lawyer with a regular column on pages with small type writes a caution about rumours. He reminds readers that the law likes nouns that do not wander. He reminds papers that verbs can be sued if they behave as if they have eyes. His piece will run below the fold and will be read by people who have learned to respect paragraphs that do not raise their voice. The first edition rolls with a sound that resembles rain on roofs. Bundles fall into the arms of men who have always lifted bundles. They toss the papers into trucks that believe in alleys. On top of one bundle, a headline peeks out that could be about anything, and is about the lane and the drive and the kind of day that makes maps feel like gossip. In the county, the small paper decides to wait for morning. It will run a front page with a photograph of the river, looking like the patient parent of all dramas. It will include a column that lists the last frost dates from the past 10 years because farmers need this more than they need to know how many suits visited a porch. It will place a brief about the unusual traffic under the weather and above the shoe repair advertisement. This layout makes the county feel like itself. Meanwhile, a newsroom in another city takes the wire item and teaches it to march. The headline warms itself with strong words that attract attention like fireworks attract small boys. The story mentions a hill and a lane and a list of names that have not been confirmed. The copy desk trims and trims until it fits the space between a cartoon and the standings for teams that have already lost. Back at the house, the boardroom that was not a boardroom begins to fold itself away. Men phone for cars that are already waiting. The cousin arranges hats so that no one will have to hunt for identity at the threshold. The backyard exhales. The driveway prepares to compose departures in a minor key. The trooper in his car checks a watch that runs on courtesy and decides which minute to occupy next. In kitchens and parlours, the first city editions are laid on tables with a thump that persuades cats to relocate. Headlines shine, names wait like hooks. People read and make soft noises that count as opinions. A woman says a house is a house and should be left alone unless it invites you. A man says plates are for cars, yet plates tell stories if you teach them how. Another says the county finally made the city look up from its sidewalks, and it did so by being exactly what it always was. In the newsroom, a fact-checker phones a trooper and asks for confirmation with the care of a person handing glass to a stranger. The trooper declines to decorate the report. He confirms only that roads exist, that cars travel, that duty includes looking where looking is required. The fact-checker writes thanks and hangs up. He has done his job. Doing a job is quieter than making a point. A radio announcer reads a brief into a microphone the size of a grapefruit. His voice is rich and slow. He says the name of the county so that letters relax. He says authorities are looking into a gathering of unknown purpose. He says more details as they become available. He does not promise that details will become available. He allows night to hold some of its own air. Back at the small paper, the editor finishes a paragraph that will stand in the morning like a fence that was put up to keep the wind from behaving foolishly. He locks the office by the method that old doors prefer. He walks home through a town that knows how to lower its volume without being asked. He passes the exchange where a night operator knits holes into a scarf between rings. He passes the diner where cups dry in a rack made of silver wires that reflect lights like small rivers. In the city, the last edition thunders onto loading docks, where men move with the speed of people who own maps in their heads. On the front page, a photograph from years ago is used as if it were new, because pictures of houses are required to be current to be correct. The caption is careful. The story is large enough to be seen from a window. The window looks down on streets that have never seen a hedgerow. The country sleeps the way fields sleep when weather has not chosen sides. The house removes the coat-room from its special assignment and returns it to ordinary custody. The cousin turns the pencil width of window into a whisper width and thanks the hinge for today. The driveway receives its last pair of tires and begins to erase the day by being walked on by night. Newspapers will tell the story in several dialects. Some will be loud and pleased with themselves. Some will be soft and a little embarrassed at having to discuss such things at supper time. A few will be exact in a way that seems plain until later, when plainness begins to shine. Quiet rooms will prefer those papers, and will save them in drawers with twine. If you are drifting, let the sound of a press be the rain that moves across your roof. If you are awake, imagine the small paper unfolding on a kitchen table where a plate waits for eggs in the morning. The headline will not shout, it will nod. It will say that attention visited and that the county behaved like a county. It will say that the house returned to itself before the ink was dry. It will leave some lines empty for the next. Courts are calendars with furniture. They are rooms that turn days into duties, and duties into sentences that begin with your honor and end with we will reconvene after lunch. When newspapers grow curious, courts put on their cleanest shirts and ask everyone to come sit for a while. The county understands this rhythm. It is another harvest. Only the crop is ours. The courthouse wakes early. Janitors have been there since the hour that still belongs to bakers. Floors breathe soap. Benches line up as if taking attendance for trees. The flag waits with the discipline of fabric that has learned the wind. A clock tells the correct time as if that were a brave act. Outside, a set of steps practices being climbed without turning into theatre. Clerks arrive with keys and pencils, and a patience that smells faintly of envelope glue. They open drawers that know which papers live where. They set out water glasses on a table that has heard everything and learned to tell no one. They stack files that are dramatic by themselves. A file is a low voice. When there are many files, the voice becomes a crowd. A bailiff unlocks the door between hallway and courtroom and tests it twice, once to be sure it opens, once to be sure it closes. The door passes both tests with a sound that hints at history without bragging. The bailiff nods to the door, nods to the clock, nods to a bench that will carry more posture than comfort today. A nod is a small oath that keeps buildings honest. Summonses went out last week, thin letters folded twice. They began in a bin that smells like pencil shavings and ended in kitchens where people read them in the steady light near the bread box. Some readers sighed because they were already busy learning to be citizens in other ways. Some readers smiled because they believe in rooms with rules and water pitchers. Everyone set the letters where important mail lives, under the magnet that knows birth announcements and due dates, and the tax bill that grows wiser each spring. On the morning of the first hearing, shoes gather at the bottom of courthouse steps. City shoes visit, polished like small opinions. Farm shoes arrive, dignified by dust that refuses to be ashamed. Reporters' shoes hop, as if they were slightly caffeinated. Trooper shoes stand at ease with the calm that boots inherit from roads. Everyone brings a sound. The courthouse blends them into courthouse sound. Inside, benches learn the names of coats. The room fills slowly because slow is respectful. People sit with the space of a hand between strangers. The air smells like wood that has agreed to be furniture for so long it no longer misses trees. A clerk writes case numbers on a list that will be read in a voice designed to carry without rised. There is a man who knows where files live. He moves among cabinets with the gait of a person who shelved books as a boy and never forgot the map of letters. Today he has pulled anything that might be asked about cars that visited a certain lane, and about the men who own addresses in cities where tall buildings practice weather. He places the files on a rolling cart and tells the cart that it will appear to be important for a few days. The cart says nothing, which is the quality courts admire most in carts. A judge arrives by a door that prefers not to be noticed. The robe is ordinary as robes go. The face above it has the look of a person who measures tide against fairness and does not expect a perfect result. He sits, and the room sits with him. The bailiff calls the room to its posture. Reporters look down as if their pencils have become very interesting. The pencils enjoy this, because pencils crave purpose. The first order of any such day is it a case. It is tone. The judge says good morning as if he is drafting a weather report. Calm with small chance of thunder late, he explains that attention is a guest but not a host. He says we will take this in steps. He says we will begin by agreeing on what we are doing. The room relaxes by the thickness of a page. Subpoenas, those polite demands printed in stern type, have asked certain people to appear. Some wear suits that know how to sit still, some wear jackets borrowed from cousins who attend weddings. A few wear expressions that believe in the virtue of errands. All of them have brought their names inside pockets and will be asked to take them out carefully. The clerk prepares to spell everything twice. The first witness is it dramatic. He is a man from the gas station who knows bells and rags and the proper pressure for tires that face hills at dawn. He says hello to the judge as if greeting a neighbour he has never met. He answers questions about cups of water and the number of times a payphone door stuck, and whether cars from cities have a different way of drifting toward a pump. The transcript records these answers with the patience of rain filling a barrel. A lawyer from the city asks a question about a detail that does not wish to be a detail. He speaks in clean sentences that could be sold by the yard. The man from the station thinks for the time it takes to fold a rag. He answers in a way that keeps adjectives on a leash. The court reporter writes down the words at a speed that convinces pens to be humble. Next comes the grocer. He wears an apron that has been politely washed, though flour remembers where elbows rested. He tells the court that cold cuts were sliced as ordered, and that bread was selected for its ability to ride in trunks without sulking. He confirms that a large order is not a crime. He confirms that pickles go where pickles have always gone, which is into jars and then into stories told over plates. The judge thanks him the way one thanks a citizen for completing a fence that faces wind. A trooper testifies without trying to be interesting. He has a notebook. He has a memory that cross-checks with the notebook like two accountants nodding to each other from opposite ends of a ledger. He reads numbers that sound like steps counted on a porch, plate numbers, times, makes and models that the room receives as if they are types of weather. He offers no conclusions. Courts prefer to build their own. Defense and prosecution begin their dance, though dance is not the correct word because courts rarely dance. They perform a slow exchange of verbs. Did you observe? Could you confirm? Were you aware? Each question is a small box into which the witness must place one object. The witness places an object and steps back. The box is carried to a table and stacked with other boxes until the table looks like a modest pyramid whose purpose is to reach a point called context. Reporters take notes in a style learned from afternoons at ballparks, short facts, shorter quotes. They draw small stars next to lines that will sell papers. They draw small circles next to lines that will correct papers. They print the name of the county with care because county names are the spellings people call to complain about first. One reporter sketches the shape of the courtroom door on his pad because he believes in the power of doors. Outside the courthouse, Steps receive shoes at a steady rate. People come and go because not everyone can sit through the whole performance of duty. Coffee stands appear near corners as if summoned by the appetite of attention. Cups offer warmth to conversation that needs to keep a respectful distance from verbs like accuse. The weather continues to mind its business with the calm that buildings borrow from skies. Inside, a clerk reads a list of exhibits. They sound like a catalogue for a museum of errands. A map of a county road copied onto a larger sheet. A photograph of a mailbox that never asked to be famous. A ledger of telephone calls showing only times and durations. Modest columns that prefer to be mistaken for something else. The court accepts these with the same nod it would give a hat hung on the proper peg. Lawyers compare calendars in voices meant for libraries. Return dates are suggested for the sake of witnesses who have to harvest or to mine shops or to catch trains that will not forgive delay. The judge finds a week shaped like fairness. He announces it in the tone of a town crier whispering good news. A chorus of pencils marks the same square on different pages in different pockets. A woman from the telephone exchange sits for questions. She explains chords and lamps and the etiquette of party lines. She is careful not to say what she did not hear. She says only what the lamps said. Lamps are honest instruments when asked to remember. Her testimony is a lesson in the holiness of signals that do not wander into judgment. The court learns something it did not know about the kindness of switchboards. By noon the benches creak like ships turning toward port. The judge calls a recess with the measured kindness of a teacher who believes in lunches. People stand and remember knees. Voices loosen in the hallway where the echo has agreed not to become a rumour. Outside on the steps the day resumes its ordinary balance for exactly the space of a sandwich. At the newsstand a headline from another city shouts a word the county has not used. People frown and then buy it anyway because the price includes comics and the baseball standings. In pockets, the county paper waits to reply tomorrow with a paragraph about frost dates and a brief on unusual traffic placed between weather and shoe repair. Balance is an editorial art practiced by towns without needing the word editorial. After lunch, the court receives the neighbour with the chairs. He testifies to the shape of helpfulness. He says he lent what he could. He says chairs are not political and neither are coat racks. He says he can identify his chairs because he knows their scratches and the way one leg prefers an extra felt pad. The courtroom smiles silently, which is the only kind of smile a courtroom allows itself. Questions come about the backyard, not about what was said, about the furniture of the hour, how many chairs, were they arranged to face one direction or several? Was there a table? Was there fruit? Did anyone move the blanket on the bench? These questions feel like weather reports taking a statement from a tree. The answers are plain and remain plain after the court reporter gives them back as words on paper. An officer from the state speaks about plates and the patience of notebooks. He uses the word observation as if it were a broom steady and useful. He avoids nouns that would sharpen the air. He names counties and not men. He names colours and not opinions. The judge accepts this broom and helps sweep the hour into a pile that to be examined without anyone catching a splinter. Lawyers request time to prepare more time. They ask the court to send additional polite demands for presents. They ask for the endurance of calendars. The judge gives the requests a shape that will not fall over. He sets guardrails made of days. He imagines how many sandwiches the bailiff will carry between now and the next hearing. He imagines nothing else, because judges practice a form of fasting that keeps their minds from crowding the table. In the corridor, the payphone learns to put down roots. Coins pass through its throat like short sermons. Some calls are to barbers for hair that suddenly wishes to be modest. Some calls are to wives who prefer supper to surprise. Some are to editors who want 10 words now and promise to come back for the rest. The phone handles these with the grace of a public instrument that believes in counties. The afternoon gives the podium to a clerk from a city office that lives among marble. He testifies to the existence of paperwork that describes businesses which are ordinary in one light and interesting in another. He explains indexing and how a name could be spelled several acceptable ways by several acceptable people. This causes a small laugh in the room that feels like a drawer sliding closed without sticking. A reporter from a large paper asks the bailiff whether photographs will be allowed. The judge permits photographs of the building from the sidewalk, but not of faces inside. The building enjoys the attention because buildings like to be remembered for exactly what they are. The faces prefer to belong to their own sentences. The rule is understood and becomes like a coat worn without remark. Late in the day, the judge concludes the session with a sentence that has learned manners. He thanks the witnesses for their tie, which is to say for slices of their lives that could have been used on ladders or at counters or in barns. He thanks the counsel for order. He thanks the jury for patience, though this is not yet a trial and there is no jury. The habit of thanks suits the room. The gavel touches wood like a fingertip on a table to call a child to dinner. People rise. The door between hallway and courtroom proves again that it opens and then closes. Benches empty the way fields empty after a harvest, when stubble remains to remind the earth of work. Clerks gather cups and papers, and the day begins to fold itself into the shape called record. Outside, the steps receive shoes in the opposite direction. Sunlight turns the stone into a photograph without a camera. Reporters dictate lines into phones that carry voices to pages. They choose the careful verbs. They leave the fancy ones at the curb. A trooper speaks softly to a colleague about fuel and routes and which hour will serve best for the next slow lap around a county that has learned to be observed without forgetting to be itself. The courthouse returns to its evening posture. The flag rests in a quiet that does not need anything except respect. Janitors again have the hour. They sweep up the day as if it were leaves. The judge removes the robe and becomes a person who looks at a sink and a towel and appreciates water. Clerks lock drawers that have swallowed names and will keep them until asked. The door breathes in and breathes out. Back in kitchens, people unfold the county paper that has not yet caught up with the city paper's speed, but has caught up with the county itself. They read a paragraph that sounds like a neighbour and not like a trumpet. They put the paper beneath a dish to catch the breadcrumbs that make every supper better. They talk about the weather of the day. They talk about the price of eggs. They talk about how courts ask everyone for tithe and how everyone usually gives it because that is how a place learns to stay one place. At the gas station, the young attendant closes the drawer and counts the bell rings in his head. He decides there were more than usual and fewer than enough to make a legend. He wipes the pump handles one more time because clean is a way to tell a day it may end with dignity. He looks toward the courthouse lights and nods once. Buildings understand, nods. Night returns to its jurisdiction. The courthouse holds still like a ship in harbour. The county drifts past it on quiet tires. Somewhere, a printer is setting type that will claim too much and type that will claim just enough. Somewhere, a pencil is being sharpened for the last time today. Somewhere a coat is hung on a chair in a kitchen and remembers the bench it warmed. If you are drifting, the sound of a gavel that did not need to be loud can be the last thing you hear. If you are awake, consider the furniture of fairness, a door that works, a bench that forgives, a clock that tells the truth without seeing the headlines. The courts requested everyone's time and the county gave it, 1 hour after another, until the day was recorded and put away like a ledger that has balanced its. Congress is a house that collects questions the way a harbour collects ropes. Every rope has a tag, every tag has a number, every number wants to be attached to a story that to be carried without tearing the pocket that holds it. When country roads send rumours to cities, Congress puts on its reading glasses and asks for a diagram. A hearing room wakes earlier than it needs to. The lights over the dais hum like bees that studied etiquette. Green lamps on the tables try not to boast about their shade. A row of chairs waits with the patience of old pews. The flag stands exactly where the room has decided it should always stand, and the microphones lean forward as if they are interested in breakfast. Clerks arrive with boxes of paper that make their arms look brave. They set out pencils that have already agreed to take sides only with legibility. Pitchers of water are arranged on coasters that believe in quiet. Nameplates are slid into grooves that remember more names than anyone can recall. The air smells faintly of wool and paper, and a clean kind of dust that likes to talk about law. Staffers make a small weather of footsteps. They carry folders the colour of stop signs, and folders the colour of calm. One brings an easel with a face like a schoolteacher on the first day. Another brings a roll of paper that dreams of becoming a map. Their jackets have pins that announce committees the way lapel flowers announce weddings. Coffee appears in cups that stack inside one another like arguments. In an anteroom, witnesses practice the art of being brief. A trooper from a northern county reviews a page of notes that are mostly hours and makes of cars and the words arrived and departed. A grocer looks at his hands and decides that if anyone asks about bread, he will say, "It was good bread," and that good bread can travel without losing its temper. A switchboard operator has been flown in by people who respect lamps and cords. She holds her purse in her lap as if it were a small boat on a quiet lake. Members file in with the rhythm of coats taking their hooks. Some know the room as a second home. Some know it as a stage they use only when seasons change. Their faces carry districts. Their ties carry habits. They open folders and find in them questions that were sharpened yesterday. They place pencils in neat rows. They look up at the gallery where curiosity begins to stack itself in polite layers. A gavel learns its job again with 2 taps. The chair explains that today will be about pictures made from facts, not accusations, diagrams, not myths, maps. The room nods in the way rooms nod when they are assigned a chore their grandparents would have understood. The first chart is at a creature of drama. It is a large sheet of paper with boxes that have decided to connect themselves with lines. The boxes say things like road and house and phone and plate. The lines are shy. They cross only where they have been invited, and they stop whenever the invitation ends. Staffers wheel the easel into place, and the chart becomes a citizen of the hearing. A counsel begins with a voice that respects furniture. He traces a finger from a box labelled road to a box labelled house, and reads dates the way careful people read recipes. He moves to boxes that say station and grocery and exchange. He asks the trooper whether this line is as long as it should be, and whether that box should move a little to the left. The trooper confirms distance as a person who counts tire marks confirms distances, with the calm that numbers produce when they are used gently. Another chart shows a calendar of days with modest marks where traffic was noticed and modest marks where the noticing was written down. No names, a rhythm only, light on Monday, heavier on Tuesday. A square of quiet where the sky did a favour and rained. The members bend forward in the shared posture of people listening to a metronome. A map enters next, and the map is proud because maps were raised to be proud. It shows a county that keeps its rivers tidy and its roads honest. It shows a lane that learned to be interesting for an afternoon. The chair asks the trooper to point to the place where he parked, and to the place where he stopped for coffee, and to the place where the bell hose counted cars until it lost track of boredom. The trooper points. The map accepts his finger with grace. A member from a far state asks a question that sounds like a story hoping to dress up as a question. The counsel thanks him, and returns to the easel as if the easel were a friend who knows how to redirect conversation. Boxes and lines rescue the hour. This is what diagrams do. They offer patience when adjectives have gone ahead and tired themselves. The switchboard operator is called. She sits with her hands folded in a way that informs the room she has brought her own order. She explains lamps that wink and cords that connect, and the right number of rings allowed before a call is considered unsociable. She describes busy periods that arrive in clusters and then wander off to be busy somewhere else. She does not report words. She reports the electricity of conversation as seen through routine. The court reporter watches her mouth and writes as if copying a recipe for calm. Staffers produce a small sketch of a switchboard with little circles where lamps sit. They have drawn an arrow labelled party line. The operator nods and in a few sentences makes the drawing more accurate than it was a moment ago. A member murmurs useful. Another murmurs admirable. The room learns to admire a thing called traffic without needing to know who said what to whom. The grocer testifies with a voice that knows scales and paper string. He shows a receipt book that does it contain names, quantities, and the occasional note that means, remember to order more mustard, with a softer temper. A member asks whether a large order would fit in an ordinary trunk. The grocer says yes if the driver does not mind his spare tire behaving like a guest. Laughter appears and leaves before anyone can offer it a seat. A chart appears that is nothing but times and lanes and notes in pencil that say things like pause and rain and cat. Present. The chair smiles at cat present in spite of himself and asks whether the cat altered traffic in any measurable way. The trooper says the cat approved of one car and slept under it. That car left later than most. The chart accepts this and no one asks it to mean more than it means. A member requests that the staff draw a line from county to city and back again to explain how attention travels. The staff obliges, and the line looks like a string between two tin cans. The chair observes that lines between attention and place are often thinner than anyone likes to admit. The diagram agrees by being thin. In back of the room the press rows nave like ducks. Their pencils move. Their voices rest. They adore diagrams because diagrams let them write sentences that sound more important than opinions. They will say the committee heard visual evidence. They will say patterns were examined. They will say the switchboard was a citizen of the day. They will save the cat for the last paragraph if the editor leaves room. There is a moment when the hearing forgets to be grand and becomes useful. It arrives when a counsel asks a witness to explain how a car could arrive 3 times in 90 minutes without confusing the road about whether it had already seen that car. The witness explains that roads are patient and that men often test the same turn twice before they agree to trust it. A member writes patient on his pad and underlines it because patience is something rooms to use. The staff rolls out a long strip of paper with a timeline that does not try to impress anyone. Marks for early arrival. Marks for pause. Marks for conversations on the porch that required a hat to be placed on a knee. The timeline travels the length of the table, passes a pitcher of water, passes a stack of folders that want to be taller, and ends near a chair that notices it and chooses not to move. A counsellor asks whether the day under discussion is unique. The trooper answers with an honesty that does its care about headlines. Unique in the sense of many cars, not unique in the sense of people gathering and drinking coffee and discussing business dressed as courtesy. The room breathes. Members write the word gathering and give it its proper size. Small, important, not a parade. A diagram shows the backyard. Not people, furniture, chairs in a friendly arrangement, a table with a picture, a bench with a blanket, a tree that does not care about titles. A member asks whether the chairs faced one direction more often than that. The witness says they face the kind of direction chairs choose when they want to let men look at each other and also at the sky. The diagram looks pleased to have been understood. Water is poured, cups find hands. The hum of the room lowers itself as if reminded to carry weight correctly. A staffer places a single photograph on the easel. It is of a mailbox and a lane and a curve of road that looks like a sentence written by someone who learned penmanship in a school that had. The chair asks whether this is the lane. It is the lane. A member says the photograph doesn't prove anything. The chair answers that photographs seldom do. They prompt. They seldom prove. The room approves of this distinction without saying so. A counsel requests a break in order to let the eyes rest. Eyes are a resource, and hearing spend them. The gavel taps permission, and the room becomes a room again. Staffers tidy the diagrams the way a librarian adjusts a shelf after a child has made a fort of picture books. Witnesses stretch the kind of stretch that is pure spine and no opinion. Reporters migrate to a corridor where coffee has learned to be available. During the recess, a member stands before the long timeline as if it were a painting. He tilts his head the way people tilt their heads when they want to see what the painter wanted them to see. He asks a staffer about the spacing between marks. The staffer explains the scale and the member nods as if someone has just told him the proper distance between porch lights on a long street. When the room returns, the chair suggests that the committee will not make conclusions today. The chair suggests that they will arrange what can be arranged and leave what cannot for later without scolding it. He asks for the diagram that shows how attention moved from road to paper to courtroom to here. The staff produces a modest drawing that looks like a path through a park. The chair says that will do. Letters from citizens are read into the record in voices that try to honour the penmanship of strangers. One says a county should not be asked to know every hat that visits. Another says a county should not be expected to ignore a line of cars that does not belong to a holiday. Both letters sound like neighbours. Both letters belong in the file. The clerk ties a ribbon around them with hands that know the width of ribbon needed to hold two opinions still. A member asks about money. He does not ask the loud kind of question about money that raises a room temperature. He asks the quiet kind about how much tide costs and how much attention costs, and whether calendars are an honest currency for communities. A witness says a day spent in court costs a harvest of hours, and a harvest is something you do not joke about. The member thanks him and writes harvest on his pad and underlines it. Someone tries to ask a question about names the way a fisherman tries to cast into waters that were posted no fishing. The chair lifts a hand, and the cast is reeled back before the line snags. "We are building maps," he says. "We are not engraving headstones." The room remembers its assignment and is relieved. Near the end, a careful counsel places one last diagram on the easel. It shows nothing but arrows that begin at errands and end at rooms. An arrow from a grocery to a kitchen, from a station to a road, from a lane to a notebook, from a notebook to a courtroom, from a courtroom to this room. The counsel suggests that most arrows in a country like this return home eventually. The chair says he hopes so. The room hears this hope and files it in the drawer labelled "Good to Keep." The gavel touches wood once more. Members gather their pencils and their pins. Staffers roll at maps that have worked hard. Witnesses reclaim their ordinary shapes and think about trains and sandwiches and the kind of sleep you get after you have been polite for many hours. Reporters carry away verbs that will behave. Diagrams are stacked, tied with string, and labelled in a hand that will be legible 20 years from now. Outside, the city is itself. Cabs pronounce impatience, sidewalks keep appointments, windows consider their reflections. The hearing room exhales like a building that has finished a paragraph. The echo returns to its cupboard. The flag rests. The green lamps turn their faces down. Back in the county, the lane has not become larger. It is the same curve with the same branch that marks the height of trucks. The mailbox is exactly where it should be. The cat that runs the customs office sits on the boundary between gravel and grass, as if she had been asked to testify and declined. The road holds the memory of a day and offers it only when feet are slow enough to deserve it. Congress likes a diagram because diagrams keep adrenaline out of sentences. They keep rooms from boiling when simmer will do. They ask people to look and to point and to say yes. That is the distance, and yes, that is the number of chairs. And no, the cat did not alter the traffic, except by reminding everyone that patience holds many small jurisdictions. If you are drifting, let the lines on the map be threads that hold your thoughts in a friendly pattern. If you are awake, picture the staffer rolling the last chart and sliding a rubber band over its middle with the care you would give a loaf of bread. Tomorrow the chart will be unrolled, and it will still show the same quiet facts. A road, a house, a day, arrows that travel without sirens, a story held together by paper, string, and the belief that patience is a form of law that people obey without noticing. Morning is a bookkeeper. It opens to the right page even if no one told it which page to choose. The night has been erased by steam from kettles and the small courage of breakfast. Newspapers are folded into shapes polite enough to sit beside eggs. Telephones remember to ring like birds instead of bells. The day has decided to count. In the house that hosted attention, a table becomes an office. Not an office with titles, an office with pencils arranged by length and a square of paper that keeps the cup from leaving a ring. Someone has set a small ledger on the table. It smells like paste and patience. Inside, lines wait the way fields wait in spring. Names are not invited. Hours are. So are chairs returned and cups washed and kind favours owed to neighbours who lent more than they were asked. The cousin from the coat room writes gently. The pencil says yesterday in a hand that rests between careful and modest. There is a column for time, a column for objects, a column for thanks. In the margins a private weather appears, light rain, fog by hedges, cat approved one car. These notes will mean everything to the house later and nothing to anyone who does not live here. That is the correct arrangement. The kitchen keeps its own ledger. It is a book. It is a memory kept in jars and in how many towels hang to dry. A platter is counted retired for the month because its chip has grown into a sentence no one can ignore. A knife is promoted from cheese to bread because bread has proven that it forgives. The urn is returned to the shelf with a small victory ribbon only the cook can see. Aftermath is the gentle reshuffling of objects that served. Across town the grocery opens early for deliveries and for stories that are not stories. The owner writes 2 lines on his pad, one for cold meats comfortably consumed, one for mustard that behaved. He circles a number and decides it means gratitude. He doesn't call it sales, he calls it a community, remembering to be hungry in order and not in a rush. Maps wake up later than ledgers. They have a slower pulse because paper oceans do not creep toward breakfast. On a desk in the small newspaper office, a county map lies flat, like a patient animal. The editor sets a coin on the corner to keep it from curling, then takes a pencil for a walk. He draws dots where cars were noted. He draws a faint line from dot to dot as if connecting stars that prefer farming to astrology. He will cut this out and paste it into a file with a date. Files like to feel accompanied. At the courthouse, a clerk ties a ribbon around a slim bundle of testimony. The knot says we will come back to this when both the weather and calendars agree. He labels the bundle with a date, and a word that does not try to be dramatic. He sets it on a shelf between matters that concern fences and matters that concern wells. Law is a geography of shelves. The trooper opens his notebook and does what troopers do after the day has stopped trying to pretend it is ordinary. He copies. He makes a clean page from the road written page. Plate numbers become neat citizens. Times line up without arguing. Small notes move into the margin like shy children at a photograph. He does not add colour or opinion. He adds only legibility. Aftermath is legibility. Down the street, the gas station attendant sweeps in front of the pumps, as if sweeping could alter history by half a pebble. He empties the trash near the booth and oils the door that sticks. On a scrap of receipt paper he writes, "Bell rang often yesterday," and folds it once and tucks it into a pocket. This is his ledger. He will find the scrap later and nod to it as if greeting a friend at a crosswalk. In kitchens across the county, conversations take inventory, not of men, of minutes. How long it takes for a roomer to make the trip from porch to store and back again. How long until a headline forgets the countryside and returns to its favourite city verbs. People speak in measures, about the price of eggs, about the good sense of waiting, about the way gravel remembers tyre pressure for a day and then forgives. The big city papers mail their certainty to breakfast tables 2 counties over. The small paper prints its paragraph with a picture of the river. The paragraph mentions attention and leaves out speculation. Between weather and shoe repair, a sentence says that unusual traffic occurred and that the courthouse will undertake to discover the shape of it, with the public invited to bring patience. A map of winds sits above the fold. The county prefers winds. Chairs travel home. The neighbour with the good heart and the better memory checks the legs for new scratches and finds none worth a complaint. He writes a note in his head. Chair 11 wants a felt pad. Chair 12 needs kindly attention when sat upon by a gentleman who underestimates gravity. These are the kind of notes that accumulate into a life. They are never printed, and they control everything. The phone exchange writes its own aftermath by way of a column that records minutes. The operator takes a ruler and draws a faint line under yesterday. This is not a rule. It is a courtesy to today. She files the sheet where it will be found and where it will not be misread. Lamps wink their morning friendliness. Cords are coiled that were earning hazard pay a night ago. Even wires sigh. In the city, a committee room receives boxes, diagrams rolled like quilts, transcripts that smell of ink. A staffer writes labels in a steady hand that could address 100 letters without smudging a single name. She places a sheet on top of the stack. It says continue when useful. It does not say return when loud. Useful and loud have never agreed on a calendar. The house considers its yard. The grass has resumed its private business of recovering from footprints. Under a tree, a faint oval remains where the bench kissed the earth. The oval will be gone tomorrow. The house approves of erasure. Erasure is a form of mercy given to places that do their duty without asking for plaques. The cousin puts the rack back where it belongs and finds that he can lift it with less effort than the day it arrived. Coats, even when absent, teach hands about weight. He closes the window in the coat room to the width of a thread. Air thanks him. Wool rests. The cousin writes one last tiny line in the ledger. Chairs returned. House breathes. Then he closes the book because books must not be allowed to become gossip. Somewhere in the county a barber keeps a mental map of talk. He pins small thoughts to corners where men prefer to sit. He ties string between a pair of opinions that would fight if you put them in the same pocket. He snips the string and sweeps. Hair is an excellent record of living that asks to be taken out with the evening trash. The barber obeys. On a kitchen wall, a calendar receives 3 pencil marks. One on the day of the gathering that wished to be unremarkable, one on the day the courthouse requested died, one on the day the county paper printed a paragraph that balanced itself like a cup on a rail. The 3 marks are not connected by lines. Connection lives in heads and in habit. The trooper turns his notebook into a map again. He draws the lane. He draws the pull-off. He draws a small square where he bought coffee that tasted like a plan. He writes the word patient near the lane and the word visible near the crossroads and the word ordinary near the diner. Ordinary is the ambition of every good map. A schoolteacher in town uses the local paper to teach arithmetic to a room of children who do not know their county has been in a headline. She writes numbers on the board. How many cars? How many minutes? How many days until the next hearing? She does not write why, she writes how to count. Children learn to count before they learn to conclude. This is the correct sequence. The small bank notes an unusual number of visits by men who wish to confirm balances and to ask for envelopes that fold well. The teller counts with the discretion of rain-counting roofs. She stamps dates and returns passbooks with a nod that suggests gravity. In her ledger she writes the amounts, and in her mind she writes the weather. Cool, calm, wind from the west. A priest folds a morning homily into 2 sentences about patience and neighbourliness. He doesn't say anything about lanes or plates or cities that send attention north. He says, after a day of busy talk, wash your cups and return your chairs. The congregation nods because chairs are a language they share and do argue about. At the house a broom embodies policy. It visits corners and shows no interest in headlines. Dust attempts philosophy and is escorted gently to the pan. The broom stands in the closet the way a veteran stands at a parade he did not ask for. This is aftermath as practiced by bristles, quiet persistence without notes. In a back room, the host of yesterday uses the kind of pencil that erases cleanly, to write 3 letters that will be mailed with stamps that have trains on them. 1 letter says thank you for the chairs, 1 says we will settle the butcher, and we are grateful for his judgment in sharpness and thinness. 1 says it is best if we leave the porch quiet for a while. Each is folded with the seriousness one reserves for recipes and for maps. The neighbour with the postal bag knows more about aftermath than anyone. He takes letters from the box with the attention of a person pulling threads that should not be broken. He places other letters in the box that report on insurance and on seed catalogues and on sales that can wait until spring. He notes nothing out loud. Mail is a river with manners. On a chalkboard in the sheriff's office a line is drawn under a heading. The line does not declare victory, it declares pause. There is a list below the line of errands disguised as tasks. Speak to the station. Visit the exchange about their lamps. Check the courthouse calendar. The chalk writes steady. Chalk is the pencil of rooms that prefer sound to remain seated. A farmer at a fence marks the day by moving a stone back into place where a car encouraged it to roll downhill. He does this without commentary. He has repaired gates that knew more about trouble than any lane. He nods to his fence and walks back to the barn because animals do not read newspapers and do not plan to begin. The city puts away its diagrams after lunch and returns to its attention span, which is a swift bird. It points at a new cloud. It asks for a different umbrella. A staffer writes 2 words on a tab as she packs a box. Upstate busy. The words are not dismissive. They are labels for a memory shelf. Memory shelves survive many administrations. Late in the day the house opens a window to the width of a song, because the air has been tidy and deserves promotion. The cousin steps onto the porch with a rag and persuades the rail to look useful again. A small chip in the paint requests a schedule for improvement. The cousin agrees. Repairs are ledgers of a different kind. They record care in layers. Maps continue. A boy traces the county on butcher paper for a school project. He marks a river and a hill and a dot that means home. He asks his mother how to spell the name of the road that curves like a question. She spells it slowly, as if he were learning a family name. He is. He tapes the map to the fridge with the careful violence tape requires, and looks at it every time the door opens for milk. The grocery balances its box, coins and bills. The owner adds a line to the ledger that says coffee for trooper, marked no charge. He will forget to mention it to anyone. He will notice later that the line improved his sleep by a fraction of a blink. Sleep is also a ledger. The cousin returns the ledger to its shelf and rests the pencil in its groove. He thinks of the day as a piece of string. It tied the house to the world and has now been coiled and put away where it can be found if needed. He straightens a frame. He moves a chair 6 inches because rooms trust him. He makes tea. Aftermath has small ceremonies that require witnesses. A reporter walks the lane once without a notebook and understands why the gravel did not mind. He places a stone on the mailbox post, a private signal that he will write with his feet before he writes with his hands. He tips his hat to the cat out of superstition. The cat approves of hats that move slowly. In the courthouse, the janitor empties a bin filled with stubs of pencils and with drafts of diagrams that learned enough to be recycled. He carries them out as if carrying the day itself to its next useful form. He locks the door and touches the knob with the affection of someone who believes in knobs. He walks home by a road that doesn't enter the newspaper more than once a decade. He prefers roads like that. Night returns without a press release. It discovers everything where it left it. The house is a house again. The yard is only grass. The driveway practices being a sentence without clauses. The trooper closes his notebook and places it beside his hat the way a commuter sets bread beside a jar. The county exhales. On a shelf in a small office in town, a map sleeps under a coin. On a table in a kitchen, a ledger sleeps under a cup. On a counter in a store, a scrap of paper sleeps inside a pocket. These are the archives that keep a place from bragging about its storms. They do not ask for citation. They ask for the courtesy of being consulted when memory wants to run ahead of truth. If you are drifting, let the leafing of a ledger be the sound that turns the page of your mind. If you are awake, imagine the pencil being set down with care so that it will be sharp tomorrow. Aftermath in ledgers and maps, is it a verdict? It is a way for a county to tuck itself in, count its ribs, and say goodnight to a day that arrived as a rumour and left as a neat stack of numbers and a curved line that will always be a road. Cities do not carry echoes the way hills do. They fold echoes into doorways and stairwells and let them walk around as stories. After a day that made a country lane important, the neighbourhoods begin to listen for what it means to them. They do this while buying bread and sweeping stoops and talking to pigeons that never miss a meeting. On a block where laundry ropes rule afternoons, women lean on windowsills and measure the echo by the weight of names that do not belong to the block. They keep their voices gentle. This isn't a scandal in a hat. It is a rumour that bought a streetcar and came to visit. Someone says the house upstate had too many coats. Someone else says the coats will be back in closets by supper, and good luck to the closets. Cloth is not to blame. A barber opens early and places his chair like a small throne that forgives hair. Men arrive for trims and for the feeling that a mirror knows how they think. The barber asks about the paper. A customer says it was loud in the city pages and careful in the county page. The barber nods and starts the clippers, which are honest machines that dislike adjectives. Tools keep towns from making too much of themselves. On a corner where a shoeshine box holds court, the boy with the brush works a pair of city shoes until they behave. The man above the shoes reads 2 paragraphs out loud as if checking the grammar of fate. The boy listens and files what he hears under the heading of stories that step across state lines. When he flips the cloth, he lifts a little of the worry off the leather. Shine shoes like decisions better than confusion. In a church basement, someone has stacked folding chairs and dragged a chalkboard into the centre of the room. A handful of men and one woman draw a map with dots and arrows that say nothing loud. They ask which corners are safe for speeches about nothing in particular. They settle on corners with candy stores because candy makes every conversation gentle for a minute. The woman adds a note. Bring a bag of oranges next time. Oranges change the mood of a room the way a new rug changes a hallway. News doesn't travel in a line. It travels in a braid. One strand comes from city papers that prefer verbs with a trumpet inside. Another comes from smaller pages that admire commas and calendars. A third comes from grandmothers who know how to weigh a silence and pronounce it well meant. The braid crosses kitchens and stoops and clubrooms. Nobody knows where it started. Everyone knows when it feels tight and when it feels right. In a tenement where an alley smells like onions and yesterday rain, a boy practices his handwriting. The teacher assigned a sentence about what the county looks like on a map. He writes that counties are made of roads and names, and that some roads bring ideas to the city, and some bring ideas away from it. He does not write the word mob, he writes the word men. His mother nods. She prefers nouns that cannot be sold back to you with a headline. At a club that used to be a bakery, an elder who never hurries reads 3 clippings and puts them in order by tone. Loud first, then firm, then plain. He says the truth is a stew that requires all 3. Loud gets you to look, firm keeps you in the chair, plain keeps you from choking. The young men listen and pretend they knew that already. Pretending to know is a skill that neighborhoods teach gently. On a stoop above a store that smells like cardamom and tobacco, 2 cousins sip coffee and count the ways attention can help and harm. One says attention makes people behave for a week. The other says attention brings strangers, who do it by bread. They decide to make more coffee. Coffee keeps arguments from becoming decisions too soon. A cop on foot patrol pauses at a fruit stand where apples sit like round decisions. He buys 2 and puts one on the rail where a kid can see it. He says something about driving north last month. The fruit man says something about train schedules. They nod like 2 men who build bridges out of fragments. The echo that travelled down from a lane ends at here as a courtesy between names that will never appear in Prit. At the pier where barges rest like giant turtles, dockmen speak in a weather language. They say the wind turned cordial. They say the customs man learned a new smile. They say a cousin state saw many hats, and that hats do not pay the rent unless they are worn by sailors. Someone laughs, and the laugh rolls down the pier and into the water, where all laughs go, when a shift is not yet finished. In an office above a tailor shop, a bookkeeper makes polite mountains of numbers. He adds a column that reads stamps, phone, lunch. He writes a note to himself to order more string. He files a clipping under events that altered receipts without altering the day. His ledger has a page for storms that never reached this street. The page is calm and full of neat lines. It keeps people honest about what actually happened here. A grandmother folds shirts and hums a hymn that does not mention courthouses. She tells a child that famous is another word for trouble with an address, and that quiet is a better blanket. She tells the child that men who visit country houses return to cities whether anyone wants them to or not, and that cities will act as if the visit were the main thing when the main thing is supper. The child nods and steals a button. Children steal buttons to see if adults are still paying attention. In a police station on a busy avenue, a sergeant sets a coffee on a desk just so, and says to a detective that the county wants to be left alone by people who speak in headlines, and that the city wants to be seen holding a headline like a bouquet. The detective says both wishes are reasonable and rarely honoured. He opens a file and closes it. He writes one line: "Watch the corner with the barber and the shoe shine." Watch doesn't mean interfere. In many neighbourhoods, watch is the most important verb. On a block with a candy store that understands the economy of pennies, the owner puts a bowl of gumballs near the register and adds a small sign that says "Today only 2 for 1. He has read the city paper and the county paper and a third paper that was trying too hard. He knows children will bring coins and questions. He prepares the answers he is willing to give. Grown men should practice answers the way children practice piano. It keeps hands from shaking when the doorbell announces a stranger. At a library that still smells like paste and hickory, a librarian builds a display of maps, county maps and city wards, and a book that explains how rivers decide on their bends. She places a card that reads "Places help stories behave." She doesn't sign the card. She does not need praise. Librarians practice a quiet fame that dies on tie every evening and starts fresh every morning. A woman who keeps a ledger for a small union meets a reporter and declines to speak in the usual way. She says the story to write is "It the hats and the lane." The story to write is the hours. How many were used by courts and boards and offices while the rest of us kept trains on their tracks and bread on its route? The reporter does not write the quote. He writes a sentence about schedules that continued. The woman forgives him and buys a roll for her mother. A tailor takes in a jacket and adjusts a sleeve so that the owner will look less prepared to argue. He tells the owner that a sleeve could talk louder than a mouth. The owner laughs and says the tailor should testify before the committee that liked diagrams. The tailor says committees do not suit him because committees do not wear their own work. He pinches a seam and the sleeve learns to be less proud. Pride lives in cloth until a needle teaches it humility. At a corner table in a cafe that smells like lemon and coal, a teacher draws a line on a napkin. She labels the line city and country. She draws a dozen short lines crossing it. She says these are streets, trains, cousins, recipes, weddings, funerals, errands, and school plays that make a line into a cloth. Her friend nods and says the napkin looks like it knows more than the governor. They finish their coffee and pay without comment, because coffee deserves dignity. In a small newspaper office that still believes in pushpins, the editor compares letters to the editor. One says the county got above itself by being in a headline. Another says the county handled itself with the dignity of a barn. A third says the city loves a story that lets it feel older than it is. The editor prints all three and checks for spelling. Spelling is a more reliable indicator of character than volume. The Echo walks through neighborhoods and changes shoes. It wears boots on the docks. It wears polished black at the club. It wears soft soles in kitchens. It wears a child's shoe on the library steps. Everywhere it goes, people ask one question that contains many smaller questions. What will come of it? The best answers are the quiet ones. Let the county place the chairs back where they were. Let the courts sharpen pencils and not blades. Let the papers keep a drawer for corrections. Let the cat on the lane sleep under a car of her choosing. On an avenue where radios are sold on tine, a salesman tunes a set to a station that prefers the feel of wood over the feel of wire. The announcer speaks about senators and diagrams, and then mentions frost dates in the north, because his producer believes that frost keeps cities from becoming too pleased with themselves. The salesman nods. He knows radios like it when stations act like neighbors. A block farther on, a tailor sips tea and recalls a cousin who once drove north for apples and returned with a story about how the air up there tastes like iron and soft water. He says perhaps the men went for apples and returned with a story that will take a week to cool. The customer in his chair says apples are at the point. The tailor says apples are always at least part of the point. They agree that pie would help. Most disputes perform better after pie. In a small hall over a grocery, a civic club assembles with a bell that used to call children to class. A man with a thin moustache reads from a typed page that asks for patience and reminds people to be polite to uniforms and also to window washers. He says the economy of respect is never bankrupt. He says to write down plate numbers only if they belong to cars that block the hydrant. The club approves. They vote to send bread to the county church for the next social. They adjourn with the sound of chairs that have never hurt anyone. On the night steps of a brownstone, A couple lean against the railing and share a cigarette that believes in ritual more than in taste. They speak of cousins and of times when attention brought trouble and times when attention brought relief. They decide this is the kind of attention that will bring neither if the adults behave. They stub the cigarette, as if completing a sentence with a period that was not eager to appear. In a diner where pies rotate behind glass as if performing a train schedule, two reporters from different papers discuss tone. One says the public wants a word that feels like action. The other says the public wants a word that feels like relief. The waitress sets down coffee and says the public wants what it always wants: a bill it can pay and a seat that does not wobble. The reporters thank her because she has given them the lead they needed and because she is right. A quiet office with a view of rooftops hosts a man who draws lines no one sees. He advises people who advise people. He marks a calendar with a pencil that makes neat ticks. He decides which week will forgive attention and which week will punish it. He tells a secretary to mail a note to a cousin upstate who lends chairs. The note says thank you, and also please accept these envelopes which do not wish to make a point. Children chase each other around a hydrant that isn't open today. One shouts a headline learned from a radio, another shouts a correction learned from a grandmother. A third shouts a nonsense rhyme that refuses to belong to news. The hydrant approves of nonsense rhymes. They keep rust away. On a side street, a man who knows how to fix clocks sets three to the same truth. He says to his apprentice that cities understand time when they ask nicely. He wipes a face with a cloth and says, "Sometimes people think a day made the city older. What actually happened is that the city decided to listen." The apprentice nods as if he has heard this before. The clocks agree, because agreement is their trade. An alderman visits a corner store and buys a bag of sugar although his house has sugar. He asks the owner whether the papers hurt business. The owner says they moved customers from morning to afternoon, but they brought no storm. He adds that he doesn't sell adjectives, he sells flour and beans and a little patience in the line. The alderman smiles and says patience is the rare item that should be priced higher. The owner declines to raise the price. Night finds the neighborhoods willing to return to their regular programs. Radios switch from news to music. Chairs turn from discussion to card games that keep tempers slow. Children brush teeth and present evidence of soap. The barber locks the shop and presses his hand to the glass for a second, a private superstition that tells him he will still be cutting hair tomorrow. In the small hours, a newspaper truck sighs down a block and lowers a bundle to a doorstep, like a baby placed in a cradle. Inside each paper there is a story that learned to be careful. In the county, another paper will sit on a porch that smells like leaves and balance its paragraph between weather and shoe repair. Between these two balances, neighborhoods will conduct their agreements in the language of Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and so on. The echo lessens, does not end, it becomes part of the furniture of talk, the way an old photograph on a mantel becomes a person who joins every supper without raising a fork. People will refer to the lane by say up there, and they will refer to the day by say that afternoon, and they will nod as if nodding could add a fence to every field where trouble might try to enter. A cat crosses a city street and chooses a stoop that looks like a book. She curls on the top step and edits the night. Cats are editors who prefer stairs to desks. She decides the block has earned quiet, and she grants it. The block accepts. Upstairs, someone coughs. A trolley passes. Far away, a river tells the dark that it is doing fine. If you are still awake, let the city set you down on a bench where voices pass like sparrows. If you are sleeping, let the echo tire itself out without help from you. Neighborhoods know how to take a rumor and turn it into bread. They slice it thin. They serve it with coffee that never admits to being strong. They eat and talk, and then they put the plates in the sink and say tomorrow in the tone that makes tomorrow keep its appointment. Morning puts its hand on the porch rail and decides there is nothing to explain. The air smells like leaves that have learned bedtime stories and the faint soap of a kitchen that kept its promises. The house is here again as itself. No diagrams, no lists, only regular rooms that remember how to hold a day without asking for headlines. The front steps look down at the yard and count only what steps usually count. 1 cat, 2 birds, a cloud that is in no hurry to choose a side. Gravel rests in its usual posture, pleased to be unremarkable. The driveway has stopped thinking about other counties. It has resumed thinking about rain and about how shoes carry news of puddles. Inside, the hallway smells like wood that has been kind to shoes. A single coat hangs on the peg nearest the door. It belongs to the house and not to a visitor. The cousin runs a hand along the rack and feels the quiet that follows a busy day. Wood answers with a small remark that may be gratitude and may be dust. Both are honest. The clock in the front room keeps the correct time, as if that were a small favour done for a friend. It does not announce anything beyond minutes and hours. It has become the kind of clock that allows naps to believe in themselves. Chairs stretch their legs as chairs do. One near the window claims a patch of sun and sits in it like a cat that has read a long book. In the kitchen, pans return to their regular places with the relief of tools who prefer routine. The cook polishes the idea of breakfast until it looks like oatmeal and coffee. A plate is set for whoever wanders in first. There is a small notch in the table where a cup once landed harder than it meant to. The notch is an heirloom now. The cook places the cup 1 inch to the left, and harmony returns. Back doors make the small talk of hinges. The screen door practices its soft clap and promises not to shout unless summer flies attempt boldness. A broom leans in the corner with the posture of a sentry off duty. It is ready and also content. Readiness that does not boast is the kind that keeps houses whole. The cousin walks the rooms and takes attendance. Rug, lamp, bowl, frame, a list that lives in the eyes rather than in a book. In the dining room, the sideboard has ceased to be a station and has become a place for folded napkins that smell faintly of lemon. The cousin places a small sprig in a glass. A sprig could be a calendar when a house needs one. It says today and nothing more. The telephone rests. Its quiet is its suspicious. It is dignified. The small directory beneath it looks thinner in the morning than it did last night. Directories lose weight at night because sentences go home to their owners. The cousin dusts the shelf with a cloth that has seen more afternoons than any witness, and lays it back in its place with the affection one gives to simple things that behave. At the back of the property a washline waits with its clothespins, like teeth in a friendly mouth. The day is cool and true. Laundry may be postponed until the sun agrees to warm its hands. The yard agrees to let chores arrive when they decide to. Agreements that do not involve signatures are the agreements houses prefer. The porch bench remembers the blanket and misses it without drama. The cushion that helped an elder keep company with decisions has travelled indoors and now keeps company with an afternoon book. The bench returns to the duty of facing weather. It wears its dents like good manners. A dog from down the lane visits the corner of the yard where interesting smells usually collect. He circles once and finds only grass. He sits with a feeling that resembles approval. He drifts away at the speed of a dog who understands that nothing remarkable is the correct outcome today. The mailbox receives a letter about feed and 2 envelopes about things that can wait until the next rain. It does not receive attention this morning and is grateful. The flag practices discretion. It remains where flags rest when no one needs a signal. The post itself is straight the way old trees are straight. Not perfect. Honest. Windows lean on their frames and look at the sky until the sky looks back. Curtains move the width of a breath. On the sill, a shallow dish waits for coins that will purchase nails and twine and a paper with the farm prices. Household money is different from headline money. Household money buys days that feel like themselves. The cousin opens the coat-room window to a pencil line and then changes his mind to a thread. The room smells like cedar and patience. A single hanger lies on the table and asks to be returned to its flock. The cousin answers, and order resumes its quiet posture. Order that does not announce itself is the kind that survives winters. A note is written to the neighbour with the helpful chairs. The note says thank you and mentions felt pads with the respect given to saints. It requests nothing further and includes a promise of a pie that has not yet been baked. Promises that include pies are the safe kind. They can be fulfilled by heat and tie. A pail that measures rain receives a rinse and a place near the downspout. The cousin listens to the way water settles inside metal and hears nothing that argues. A rake is hung on its hook with the handle turned inward. Details like this do not change history. They change a day into a place that welcomes the next day. By the fence, a few leaves have the courage to fall. They land with a hush that instructs the rest of the yard in how to behave. The hedge resumes being a hedge. Yesterday it was an audience. Today it is a windbreak, and a home for small birds who hold their union meetings at dawn. The birds approve this agenda. The kitchen ledger is closed and stacked with recipe cards. The cousin places a pencil on top of the book and does its tie it with string. Nothing inside will try to escape. That is what ledgers do. They stay until asked, and then they answer only what they were asked. A good house learns that from ledgers and keeps the lesson. The cook checks the pantry with the calm of someone who knows the shape of shelves by heart. Jars nod their heads. Flour sits like snow in a place that does not fear ploughs. Coffee looks ready to lead another morning if called upon. A jar of pickles takes up its proper station on the back row. It will march forward when sandwiches require diplomacy. A distance away, the river returns to its own plan. It had ignored the day even while holding it at the edge of its reflection. Rivers are generous in that way. They let the world rehearse its speeches on their surface, and then they carry the speeches off to be sorted by stones. The house hears the river as a rumour, and is content. The trooper who watched the lane yesterday drives the far road once as a courtesy. He does not slow, he does not write. He keeps the lane in the corner of his eye and lets it be a lane. He buys coffee at the diner, tips with exact change and a nod, and continues. Roads appreciate being treated like roads. Newspapers arrive at porches and decide to mind their tone. The small paper puts the weather in a generous square and places the brief about unusual traffic beneath a photograph of a school football team that looks pleased to have socks that match. This is the art of placement. The house likes that art. It keeps homes calm. A child on a bicycle rings the bell near the hedge and counts exactly how many stones spit from the tires. He tells his friend the number as if it were a password to a fort. They ride on. The fort they imagine is in a different county. They will never find it. Imagined forts are not for finding. They are for peddling. The sun climbs and sets its hand on the roof shingles and says you have done your duty. The shingles do not answer because shingles are professionals. In the attic, a faint smell of last summer naps under a blanket. In the cellar, the jars keep their surnames and wait for winter bowls. The house is a chorus of small things that know their lines. The afternoon brings a visit from the neighbour with the chairs. He carries a sack of apples and sets it on the table without making a point of setting it on the table. The cousin brings out 2 cups. They discuss weather and felt pads and fences that lean with character. They do not discuss names or counties. They praise the taste of the apples until praise becomes silence and silence becomes ease. The cat who runs customs stretches and claims the top of the porch step. She blinks at the yard as if stamping a passport and then permits the breeze to enter. Cats are strict and also merciful. The house respects this combination. It tries to copy it by keeping doors that close and windows that forgive. Later, when the light tilts towards supper, a pot takes the stage. It was a background player yesterday. Today it is the lead. Onions vote to be helpful. A carrot keeps time. Bread slants into a basket. Plates appear in pairs and then in threes. A table that once negotiated with diagrams now handles cutlery that never filed a report. Evening steps onto the porch with the calm of a neighbour who knows the way to the gate. Lamps inside choose their smaller settings. The window glass loses its picture of trees and wins a picture of rooms. A radio on the sideboard tries music. It finds a station that prefers trumpets to headlines and keeps the volume kind. The cousin takes a walk through the house with a rag in one hand and a thought in the other. He adjusts a frame so that a face looks less surprised. He sets a book on the shelf that had been wandering on the table. He closes a drawer with the gentleness a drawer deserves. He writes a single sentence in the small ledger on the front room desk. Returned to ordinary. The sentence does not need more words. Outside, the driveway holds the weight of a single-family car. The market leaves is a modest oval that understands its life. Stars appear like pins in upholstery. The hedges practice sleep. The yard offers the dog from down the lane a final inspection, which he declines in favour of dinner. The telephone rings once to deliver a recipe for a cake that can survive travel. The cook writes it on a card with a blunt pencil and a smile that adds sugar. The cousin measures flour and hums the tune the radio was playing and decides that cake is a better use of a Tuesday than any report could be. Night comes back without commotion. It takes the porch first, then the yard, then the rooms. The clock says a time that has no argument attached. The house settles like a boat in a small harbour. Not a dramatic harbour, a reliable one. The kind that remembers each sail and each oar. Before sleep, the cousin stands at the open window and listens. The gravel is silent. The birds are finishing their late talk. A single insect writes its name in the air and then erases it. The cousin closes the window to the width of a whisper and thanks the day for staying in its own shoes. If you have drifted, stay where you are. If you are awake, let your eyes own one more detail. A cup drying on a towel. A chair that forgives. A door that opens and closes with the patience of wood. The house returns to being a house by remembering how little is required. 4 walls, a roof, a few honest tools, a ledger that knows when to quiet, a table that understands bread. The rest is weather and kindness.